Hello, my name is Robert Broadhurst from Buxton Real Estate and welcome to one of Melbourne's most historic housing precincts, Garden City, right here in Port Melbourne. This area has held a particular fascination for me since I started working as an estate agent in Port Melbourne in 1998. There are no single front terraces, there are no Victorian or Edwardian homes here. It has a distinct character all of its own and I look forward to showing you why. The land on which Garden City is situated was formerly known as Sandridge Flat and then later became known as Fisherman's Bend, which is the common term used today. A lot of the land was reclaimed land, which came about from excavations due to the demand for sand during the 1880s building boom. There are two distinct housing precincts that make up Garden City. The Bankhouse Estate is bounded by Graham Street, Williamstown Road, Howe Parade, Pillman Street and Walter Street. It makes up the first precinct of Garden City, and that area contains 322 dwellings, and these were constructed for the State Savings Bank of Victoria. The second Garden City precinct encompasses former public housing, now largely in private ownership. In 1936, the Housing Commission of Victoria assumed the State Bank's home construction role, and it acquired 22 hectares further west along Williamstown Road, over to Todd Road and back along Howe Parade. The street layout of the second precinct is noticeably still Garden City, with its meandering streets, cul-de-sacs and the consistent housing styles and building materials that were used in the former State Bank homes. The Commission's estate rehoused large families who had been living in deprived and often squalid circumstances. Some people might argue that the Dunstan estate should form part of Garden City. Its 46 dwellings, bounded by Southwood Avenue, Griffin Crescent and part of Graham Street, represent the Victorian State Government's first social housing initiative in 1936. As you can see behind me, the housing styles in the Dunstan estate are a little bit more eclectic and less homogenous than the State Bank homes, and perhaps portray a little bit softer, warmer image than the Fisherman's Bend precinct. We've talked about the layout of Garden City and the various housing styles, but an area is nothing without the human element. I'd like to introduce everyone to Mavis Bickers, the longest enduring resident of Garden City. She's lived in the same home for the last 90 years.
They all had kids and there was always kids to play with. We had the lamppost right outside our place, so that was the wicket. And opposite there was a school teacher and he was a real snog. And he had a boy and a girl, and they weren't allowed to play with us because we were too rough. When we'd hit the ball would go over their place and he used to grab them and he wouldn't give them back to us. But then all of a sudden we all grew up and there wasn't kids, and we haven't had any kids in the street for years. But as they shifted out, new people come in with the younger and they had family. Well, it's starting to build up with kids like it did when we were kids.
The demographic profile of Garden City has changed really in the last 15 years. And with an ageing population, a lot of the older residents have passed on or moved on. And this has brought in a new breed of owner-occupier. You've got young couples with or without children looking to start a family or expand the family. And you've also got the empty nester couples coming from the outer suburbs of Melbourne and other areas of Victoria, coming closer in. We're only 4 or 5 k's from the CBD. We're right on the shore of Port Phillip Bay. Garden City is a significant heritage place. The City of Port Phillip brought in planning guidelines in 1997 and later updated them in 2010. These planning guidelines brought in a heritage overlay for the area, which now means that a planning permit is required to demolish or remove part of the structure, construct a building or externally alter a building, which even means painting works. However, a planning permit is not required for internal alterations to a dwelling within the Garden City precincts. A lot of residents who buy in Garden City look to extend outwards and upwards. Two-storey extensions may be permitted at the back of the home if the roof of the extension is no higher than the roof of the original building, the walls of the extension are no higher than the walls of the original dwelling, and the extension has to match the home's original form in terms of materials and character. What I've noticed as an agent working around here for 18 years is there seems to be a lot of latitude shown by town planners at City Port Phillip when considering development proposals in Garden City. With the advent of the planning guidelines in 1997, that brought in a lot of certainty for owner-occupiers. No one wants to buy a home and have a 3-storey monstrosity put up right beside you, so that can't happen and won't. When people are more certain about the planning guidelines, they're more willing to invest money in their own home. We've seen enormous amounts of money expended in the former Housing Commission estate, as well as the bank homes. The average 2-storey renovation will cost upwards of $400,000. Essentially, Garden City is a planned, self-contained suburb surrounded by green open space and recreational reserves, the ideal of a quaint English village. Large setbacks were designed for every house to facilitate established gardens. Meandering streets discourage through traffic to make it safe for children. Most residential areas combine many different and sometimes incompatible approaches to design. In the case of Garden City, faithful adherence to a single design theme has, I think, produced an unusually harmonious and integrated urban environment. The rise in popularity in Garden City and hence the rise in prices has really been brought about obviously from the demand side, but also on the supply side of the equation. There is no available land in Garden City, it's locked up. What is built, so there is not going to be any more of it. While there's little doubt that property is a potent long-term wealth builder, it clearly goes through cycles just as other investment classes do. This means that the high long-term average returns often touted by analysts do take into account periods of very high growth and also periods when property seemingly stagnates in real terms for a few years. The following bar graphs pertaining to Garden City illustrate this fact. Invariably, prices are pushed up by the demand created by a healthy economy, high levels of employment, rising immigration and positive market sentiment. Equally, they are dragged down when the economy performs poorly, when interest rates rise, when employment and immigration figures fall, when supply exceeds demand, and when those in the market are nervous about their wealth and their future. The financial excesses of the 1980s were of such a scale that they made the 1991-93 recession inevitable. High interest rates were employed to slow the asset price boom of 1988-89. Following the election of the Howard government in 1996, inflation and interest rates lowered as government expenditure was reduced and industrial relations reforms were instigated. The northern and western suburbs were harshly hit by manufacturing closures. On the other hand, however, the growth of the service economy has seen the gentrification of the ring surrounding Melbourne's CBD, Fitzroy, Collingwood, Richmond, South Melbourne, and of course Port Melbourne being the main suburbs to benefit. Against this backdrop, prices in Garden City peaked in 2004 before entering a trough over the next 2 years, before an uplift in 2007. The onset of the global financial crisis in 2008 impacted on prices in Garden City. Despite not being a resource state like Western Australia and Queensland, Melbourne's population growth lifted to its strongest pace in 4 decades from 2010 onwards. With a current pipeline of apartments, dwelling commencement levels are showing signs of having peaked in the short term. However, dwelling supply overall remains below Victoria's underlying housing demand based on current population growth levels.
Somebody took me for a drive down to the river and they went around the beachway, and I got upset with how things have changed, because it was nothing for us to go down to the river and walking around the beach down there, and everything's different. Everything's changed, and I'm not particularly happy about wanting to see it change anymore.
The huge Fisherman's Bend project, which is on private land, will in effect create 4 new suburbs or precincts. This will house 80,000 people and 40,000 workers in an area north of Port Melbourne, towards the Balti Bridge and east towards Docklands. Invariably, it will double the size of the CBD and it will effectively join the Western Docklands edge of the CBD, and will include high-density living in apartments of up to 18 stories. Before that begins, the $1.6 billion WebDock development will be finished. The Port of Melbourne is already Australia's biggest container port, and the new project will add capacity for 1 million more containers a year. With all this development, there will be a flow-on effect to land prices. You won't get blocks of land like this in the new precincts of Fisherman's Bend. Garden City is one of a handful of Melbourne precincts which has, I think, the ideal mix of lifestyle amenities, being close to the bay, road and public transport infrastructure, shopping conveniences, social status, and of course property options in very limited supply, which is why it is in such high demand for prospective buyers. And the proof is well documented in people's willingness to pay a premium to get into this tightly held market. Only last year, our agency achieved 2 sales well in excess of $2 million for former State Bank homes. With the propensity for young families to renovate and extend these once humble dwellings, it is our fervent belief that $2 million plus transactions will not be uncommon on larger size allotments in the near future. The idea for this video first came about because of my long-held interest in the early architecture of inner city Melbourne. I've really enjoyed showcasing the different architectural styles that make up Garden City, but it's really the people I've met along the way that I've enjoyed the most. I sincerely thank each and every one of you for making this project the enjoyable journey that it has been, and I look forward to seeing you in the neighbourhood very soon. Thank you.